Lincoln had appropriated $600,000 for the colonization of African Americans. He wished to speak to some of the leading black leaders about leaving the United States, and did so through the correct channels of the African American churches. He let them know he wished to speak to the delegation. The meeting happened on August 14, 1862, although it became more of a speech than a discussion. Lincoln explained to the delegation that he had been given some money for the colonization of those of African descent. He explained that the reason he thought colonization was a good idea was because he believed both races suffered, but especially their race, simply by having to live with the white race. He says,
"Perhaps you have long been free, or all your lives. Your race are suffering, in my judgment, the greatest wrong inflicted on any people. But even when you cease to be slaves, you are yet far removed from being placed on an equality with the white race. You are cut off from many of the advantages which the other race enjoy. The aspiration of men is to enjoy equality with the best when free. But on this broad continent, not a single man of your race is made the equal of a single man of ours. Go where you are treated the best, and the ban is still upon you."
In this paragraph, Lincoln expressed his fear that even when slavery ceases to exist, they still wouldn't be treated equally. Colonization, in Lincoln's eyes, was giving them a chance to leave the inequality behind. At this point, we have to remember that Lincoln was a self-made man, meaning he left his family behind completely to go out on his own. He didn't think it was asking too much for the black community to do much the same, however, with the comfort of their friends and loved ones. They would be able to leave everything they knew, including the torture and being treated as second or even third-class citizens, and the injustice and prejudices by leaving and going with their families and others like them, and starting their own colony. According to Philip Shaw Paladin, Lincoln wrote to his friend Mary Speed in 1841 about seeing slaves being sold. He wrote, "They were being separated forever from the scenes of their childhood, their friends, their fathers and mothers, and brothers and sisters, yet they were the most cheerful and apparently happy creatures on board." Colonization was not asking them to leave anything but the familiarity of their land behind. In his experience, this was better than what many former and current slaves had to do. However, many free men were not on board with this idea. Lincoln, always persuasive, went on.
"But you ought to do something to help those who are not so fortunate as yourselves. There is an unwillingness on the part of our people, harsh as it may be, for you free colored people to remain with us. Now, if you could give a start to the white people, you would open a wide door for many to be made free. If we deal with those who are not free at the beginning, and whose intellects are clouded by slavery, we have very poor materials to start with. If intelligent colored men, such as are before me, would move in this matter, much might be accomplished. It is exceedingly important that we have men at the beginning capable of thinking as white men, and not those who have been systematically oppressed."
This seems to be a bit of a guilt trip. You are free. You have it easier than those who are not free. You need to help them. If you incredibly intelligent black men agree to leave with your families, it will first open the door for slave owners to free their slaves. Then those freed slaves would follow you in all of your wisdom to the new colony. He goes on to guilt them some more, even trying to compel them to act as George Washington would have.
Then Lincoln begins giving ideas of where they could go and the advantages and disadvantages of each. He tells them Liberia is an option, but many that have gone there have died. He says he understood the idea of them wanting to stay close to home, even though he has no idea why they would want to stay close to a country that has treated them so poorly. He gives them a seemingly new option of a colony of Cherokee in Central America.
"The particular place I have in view is to be a great highway from the Atlantic or Caribbean Sea to the Pacific Ocean, and this particular place has all the advantages for a colony. On both sides there are harbors among the finest in the world. Again, there is evidence of very rich coal mines. A certain amount of coal is valuable in any country, and there may be more than enough for the wants of the country. Why I attach so much importance to coal is it will afford an opportunity to the inhabitants for immediate employment till they get ready to settle permanently in their homes. If you take colonists, where there is no good landing, there is a bad show, and so where there is nothing to cultivate and of which to make a farm. But if something is started so that you can get your daily bread as soon as you reach there, it is a great advantage. Coal land is the best thing I know of with which to commence an enterprise. To return, you have been talked to upon this subject, and told that a speculation is intended by gentlemen who have an interest in the country, including the coal mines. We have been mistaken all our lives if we do not know whites as well as blacks look to their self-interest. Unless among these deficient of intellect everybody you trade with makes something, you meet with these things here as elsewhere.
Lincoln was looking out for the colonized. He was setting them up to go somewhere where they can prosper immediately. They would be able to get into trading with other countries and immediately make money. He said all men, no matter their race, look for self-interest, and this would be of good economic interest to them. He wanted to persuade them to choose colonization, not only because it would make the white anti-abolitionists happy, but because he believed it would benefit the blacks. He went on to tell them that the success depends on them and their willingness to work. He isn't sure they will succeed, but he will help them in ways that he can. Lincoln concluded by asking them if this was something they were interested in doing. He asked them to think about it and get back to him. The chairman said they would get back to him in a short time, and he said no hurry at all. This discussion divided the blacks in Washington and angered the abolitionists. The abolitionists argued that immigration would make the African Americans look unpatriotic. In the end, 13,000 African Americans had registered to go, but the Central American government opposed the colony. Many authors, like Bennett Jr., believe this idea of colonization showed Lincoln's racism. I disagree. First of all, it is important to understand that Lincoln's colonization was not deportation, meaning it was not forced, it was strictly voluntary. Secondly, colonization was an idea that helped Lincoln save face with the border states and anti-abolitionists. Blacks were not thought of as equals. If they were freed, according to many whites, they could not be treated as equals. Lincoln would send these black people away, and whites wouldn't have to worry about how to treat them now that they were free. However, for Lincoln, colonization was something he thought would be welcomed by blacks. They could get away from the mistreatment. He addressed a group of black leaders and essentially asked them if this is something they wanted to do. Lincoln gave his remarks on colonization on August 14, 1862. At this point, he had already written the first draft of the Emancipation Proclamation and had already read it to his cabinet less than a month before. Publicly, no one was aware if the proclamation existed. In my opinion, this address on colonization was twofold. The first is placating the border states. He does use some racial connotation. The second was to ask the blacks for their opinion on the issue of colonization. Make no mistake, he was trying to persuade the black delegation to choose colonization, but only because he believed it would truly benefit both races. Later in Louisiana, according to Foner, Lincoln said he would prefer that limited black suffrage be implemented. He singled out the very intelligent, educated free blacks, and those who serve our cause as soldiers most worthy. Again, he was slowly opening up his idea of equality for blacks, slowly so people could accept his ideas. Of course, at this point in time, only white males owning land had been allowed to vote for the better part of 100 years, which would make it difficult to get suffrage implemented for blacks.
We will never know how he would have gradually implemented the equality of blacks. Colonization was not Lincoln's racism. It was quite the opposite. He encouraged them to make their own decisions for their future.